So I had a bit of a revelation in the pub on Monday. And that's not the name of a new beer, by the way. We don't drink Revelation quite yet. But I'd forgotten my lunch. And since Monday was International Buy a Priest a Beer Day, Rob and I went to the Thornhill after Quiet Communion, both of which I would recommend. I was drinking Diet Coke, but hey, it's the thought that counts. And anyway, we found ourselves sort of continuing a conversation about dividing the sacred from the secular. And I realised in that pub, in the secular bit of life, that there are bits of my life and bits of our lives where we don't allow God access. Right back in the book of Exodus, stone tablets with 10 commandments on them were given to Moses. And they were carried around wherever the Israelites went in a box called the Ark of the Covenant. And centuries later, King Solomon installs this ark in the temple when he builds in Jerusalem. And the ark was a powerful reminder of God's presence with his people. A super holy object that was so super holy, a man named Uzzah was recorded as daring to touch it and was struck down dead. So I guess that the ark, you can see up there, was a sort of box for containing God. A magnificent golden box that was carried using poles because God was so immensely powerful and terrifyingly other and completely holy that people could only be safe in God's presence if God were hidden in a box. And sitting in the pub, I was realising how much we still like to have God in a box in 2024. But unlike the Israelites, I don't think we feel the need to put God into a box because we need to be safe from God. Jesus has put an end to that. We are holy and righteous in his sight all the days of our life. No, I think it's the other way round. I think we put God in a box because we want to protect and conserve God. So when Jesus asks, "Who do you say that I am?" if we're putting God into a box, that's really going to affect our honest reply to his question, isn't it? Who do you say that I am? What do you say that I'm capable of? Where am I active? What am I interested in? What am I concerned about? What do I love or rejoice in or favour or approve of or move through? If we confine Jesus to a box to shield him, what are we actually saying? We're saying, Jesus, we want to limit you. So, I have brought along a late ordination present that somebody gave me, and I'm honestly not quite sure what to do with it, but now it's going to get used for my sermon. This is Plushy Jesus, and Plushy Jesus is going to help us out today, and I could do with someone else, Simon or somebody, to come and just help with this. Can I give you Plushy Jesus? Stand there with that, and I'll give you some things. Okay, if you go to the side of the table, brilliant. So, Plushy Jesus, you're going to help us out. This is a box. This is my Christmas decorations box. I keep it in the attic. It comes out once a year. It's a bit dusty. It's safe to talk about Jesus at Christmas so we can get all misty-eyed as we talk about babies and angels. Can we put God in the Christmas box, please? Can we fit him in? Squish in Plushy Jesus into the box. I think if we do put Jesus into the Christmas box, we're saying that God is too cuddly and too defenseless and vulnerable, perhaps, for the rest of the year. God's too small. But even the toddlers at Barn Babies will tell you that Jesus grows up. Jesus can cope with the grown-up stuff. He worked on building sites. He got into conflicts. He challenged authorities. He saw death and disease and toxic cultures. He enjoyed parties and drinks and folk from the wrong side of the tracks. Right, where else can we put Jesus? Maybe we put Jesus, this is a challenge for you, squash him in to a children's lunchbox. That's Amelia's, apparently. Oh. Can we squash Jesus into a lunchbox? Do we think that we are still clinging, squish him in, hold him up, That we're still clinging to ideas of faith and familiar Bible stories from Sunday school days? Are we nervous of exploring our faith in more depth? Perhaps we don't really want to get to know, in 3 dimensions, the Jesus we spent time colouring in. Maybe we're not sure that as adults we really need an invisible friend. His face, yes, he's very cute. God is for kids. God is like the tooth fairy or Santa. It's something we believe in before we grow up. It's something we need to leave behind and not depend upon. And we would prefer to shield Jesus from our doubts and our questions. We'd rather touch things see things that are tangible and visible before us and be self-reliant. God in a lunchbox. What about? It's a challenge for you now, Simon. An old trinket box. I think it's actually a tea caddy, but who knows? Maybe we want to put Jesus and keep him in a traditional churchy box, a beautiful antique, where God is hidden from all the terrible ways of today's world. He's contained in a safe, historical idyll, shielded from things like social media, slam him in there, shielded from things like choosing pronouns or tattoos or vaping or same-sex couples in Strictly. He didn't want to stay there, does he? Saved from things like AI, food allergies, swearing in pop music, comedy shows, bottomless brunches, all the stuff in 2024 that just confuses us, things we can't get our head around. If he's in the box, they don't exist for him. Let's keep Jesus in a churchy box, because gentle Jesus, meek and mild, doesn't need to see that. Let's put Jesus in a nice place, a respectable, safe, old-fashioned place for a safe, old-fashioned, respectable God with Victorian sensibilities. He's in there now. But one last one, Simon. Maybe you put God in a toolbox. Maybe you hide it in the back of your garage until something breaks, and however much you try to fix it yourself with a spoon, it really needs a screwdriver or a hammer. Does God only get access to your life at a time of crisis, perhaps? Is Jesus not just a joiner, but he's also a handyman too? He's there when we need him to fix things. But where is he in our everyday lives? Are we saying that God is only there when we need him to fix things? Thank you, Simon. You can, yeah. Leave him in the box for a while. I'll get him out later. Thank you. Is Jesus bothered about the everyday? Well, the thing is, God isn't in a box, and God never was in a box, and God is not comfortably hidden safely away from the world. He doesn't wait until we decide to reveal something to God. Neither our readings, either in Proverbs or in Mark, support keeping God safe and comfortably hidden from ourselves or from today's world. And everything about them, everything that's good or annoying or funny or ridiculous or prayerful or confusing, we can't hide it. Wisdom, we hear, is in the streets, in the streets. If you spend 10 minutes in the centre of Leeds or Bradford, you'll see things that delight you. You'll see things that confuse you. You'll have things that will make you laugh. There'll be things that make you angry and things that make you sad. All life is in the streets. And wisdom cries out in the streets and squares. Do you notice the present tense of that? Wisdom cries out. Wisdom raises her voice. It's happening now. And there are theologians, maybe not me, but take their cue from St. Augustine to argue that the character of Lady Wisdom refers to Christ, the Word of God, the wisdom of God, crying out to the world. So it isn't such a great leap of faith, is it, to believe that Jesus is crying out in the streets. The streets out there, the streets in the world, all their mess and mayhem and all the joy and all the weirdness of the secular, Jesus is a sacred presence right in the heart of it, right now. I wonder if it surprises or troubles you a little to hear that Jesus is standing in Leeds on a Friday night, giggling as the girls cling to each other's arms to get to the bars in heels that are too high, That Jesus is dodging the Deliveroo cyclists as they whiz around through the crowds. That Jesus is listening to the rants of the philosopher who's on spice. That Jesus is smiling as a child is finally given that windmill they've walked past several times the vendor is selling. That Jesus is pitying the elderly man who can't remember his PIN number at the ATM. That Jesus is squatting down talking to a beggar. That Jesus is challenging the man who yells at his girlfriend outside the pub. And to all those people, the scoffers, the simple, the angry, the smug, the ridiculous and tipsy, the brash and confused, all the city dwellers, with all their folly, the message is one of justice and love. Follow me. I will make my words known to you. I will stretch out my hand to you, even though I know you might refuse it, or squash me back in a box where I can be shielded from the mess and the mayhem of your life. Who do you say that I am? Jesus asks. And when Peter replies, the Christ, the Messiah, Jesus tells his disciples quite openly how he will undergo great suffering, rejection, and death. So we don't need to shield God from the unpleasant and the troublesome stuff, the stuff that hurts us and bothers us, because he's been there and he's seen it and done it all. God should not be relegated to a children's fable or a Christmas story. He doesn't belong in a kid's lunchbox or a box of baubles. He's crying out in the mean streets. And Mark's gospel then goes on to say that Jesus explains, after 3 days, he will rise again, which means he's with us now. Christ is with us now, in the now, here and now, every now, not just in the consciously holy bits of life like today, but in the mundane stuff. And Celtic Christians used to recognise this. There'd be prayers for milking your cow, or lighting your fire in the morning. My friend had a prayer for chopping onions and washing dishes. Jesus being in now means he's unrestrained and everywhere and free and life-giving and affirming in amongst our culture. He delights in us depending on what we're doing, whether we like it or not. So whether we like it or not, Jesus is at the Taylor Swift concert. He is queuing up for chips. He is watching cheesy game shows. He is dancing in sweaty nightclubs. He's following Instagram and Twitter and X, or whatever they call it now. He's watching Netflix box sets. He's on Disney+. He's in all the fun and the leisure and the edgier bits of life that we love, but possibly don't want God to know we do because we don't feel they're very Christian. Or we feel ashamed that we aren't 100% holy 100% of the time. Maybe we're just unsure that God is even bothered about things that are happening in 2024 in the here and now. Because surely God exists in a sort of permanent past where there are stone tablets and not smartphones. Because Jesus wouldn't know how to use a smartphone. And he'd trip over his robes if he went dancing in a nightclub, and he wouldn't laugh if Peter Kay was on the television, would he? Because maybe we don't want to let God out of the please fix me box or the antique trinket box. But Jesus says to follow him, which means he is always ahead of us. He gets it. Who do you say that I am? Should we take him out of the box, Simon? Can you just release him a bit?
Which one's it?
I don't know. In a minute, we're going to say the words of the creed. Sit in there. There we go. We're going to say the words of the creed that try and articulate an answer to that question, who do you say that I am? And it'll become very, very obvious that God cannot and need not and will not be hidden in a box. Amen.